time when we don't have a lot of pressure on development would be a great thing. But I do think we need more visuals for not just ourselves, but also, you know, it's going to take us. I think it probably is going to be more of an education process, Chris, than you know, for the public to get a handle on what this really means. I may be wrong about that, but the other thing I'd like to see is I'd like to see examples that are really Jamestown specific about, you know, what the smaller parcel subdivisions might look like. You know, we had a 3-parcel subdivision up in the north end that got very cantankerous, and the road went right by somebody's backyard, 3 people's backyards, and the houses were all like that. You know, what conservation development could have done something really peaceful up there, could have made a difference. And I'm not sure that just leaving it up to developers, the reason I would go mandatory is because, first of all, I think, you know, bringing out the information about you know, the cost savings, but also there were many examples where the houses sold much more quickly because they were really desirable, because people really liked the idea. There was a cool neighborhood. It was very rural, but it was a neighborhood, and there was all this open space around it, and, you know, walking paths, or, you know, brooks and little, you know, stone fences that were preserved instead of bulldozed. All those things. People seem to, at least in some cases, they sold more quickly than anybody expected. So there are all those inducements, and I think that all of that needs to get marshaled, but I also suspect that people are just going to be conservative and want to do what they used to do. And that's why we may need to make it mandatory in order to have this become a part of the Jamestown Conservation Plan. But I think it would be really a wonderful addition to Jamestown, not just preserving things. I think it would give housing options that we don't have now that are really cool. Not that we don't have now. It would give us, it would combine some of the best things that we already have in Jamestown.
Let me ask you something, Nick. Do you consider this to be mandatory for minor subdivisions too?
I think that's one of the things I'd like to look at. If most of what we see is minor subdivision, I'd like to see an example of what that might look like if it were conservation.
Well, one of the things that
3 or 4 lot. I mean, you asked, just to finish my answer, a 3 or 4 lot. You know, you said 2 lot might not be effective unless, of course, it's already, you know, back to back with something else. So it might be with something that's already, you know, open space. But because Jamestown, you know, doesn't have a lot of 6,000-acre, you know, lots left, I'd like to see a little bit of drawing, you know, actually working out a plan in just a couple spots around the island that might become candidates.
I thought that the Cottrell Farm example was a good one, because if that had been, if it had been mandatory that all subdivisions be conservation, then maybe that would have tipped the balance to big developer buying property rather than the small developer. Small developer saw an opportunity to divide it up into 3 family lots. The big developer would never see that opportunity. So there is a price to be paid for making it mandatory for all subdivisions. You might force people into the more dense development.
I don't think that's a good, I think you're misinterpreting what the Cottrell Farm could do with 3 subdivisions. I don't think that conservation would require all 3 houses to be in the same neighborhood.
That's right.
No, but it would require them to go through more of a review process than they had to go through.
I don't know. I don't know.
Absolutely.
No, because it was only 3 lots. It would not have.
We heard enough comments when the Cottrell Farm was being developed, was being reviewed here. We were listening to things about conservation and whether they had to do this, they had to do that.
But the reality is it's only 3
And
lots.
the reality is they didn't have to do that because they didn't have to go through that
But
process.
it's only, they only proposed 3 lots, so there would be a minor subdivision.
Exactly.
But if we made it mandatory that a 3-lot subdivision had to be conservation, it'd have to go through the
That's
conservation.
not even part of this
No, but that's what
proposal.
he's saying. If we go down the road of making even the small ones conservation, everyone's going to have to go through all these checkoff lists and everything. So
I would like to request that we put this discussion on hold, because mandatory, non-mandatory is going to go on for a long time. That we're paying Randall for a couple of meetings, and he needs to have some input from us about any comments that we have, and assume that we're at least going to go forward with a document that we can work on can work on it over time. But right now, I think we need to at least get our feedback from everybody that's here about what they would recommend from what they saw already to Randall, so he can give us draft number 2. And then we can, Tony, we had both of them into us. So we can at least move on with that, and then we can discuss, because I think there's pros and cons on both sides. I agree with both.
Do you know if the DEM presentation is available on a website somewhere, or is it?
It's worth having Scott. Scott is very good. He's really worth having him in, because then he can have a dialogue
Answer,
with you.
because you see things, and when he presents,
No doubt about it.
you just put your hand up and say, wait a minute, I don't get that.
Yeah.
And he will clearly define it for you.
It
It's,
is.
it's a process to absorb, you know what I mean?
It's solidified, I think, the Conservation Commission by what we were trying to do. They really did.
He might have been here, Tony was just saying, he might have been here 5 years or so.
Yeah, that's a while ago.
Scott Lamar, I mean,
Yeah.
yeah.
He's a good man.
I've seen that slide presentation so many times that I think I could recite it by memory. If you ask Scott to come down and do a presentation that would be geared to Jamestown, what you might do is see if you can talk him into looking at a specific parcel of land that you might have had some problems with. You know, instead of giving you the example what I know he has in Richmond or Smithfield, you might be able to tailor it to Jamestown. That way it's a little bit more relevant. But you're right, a picture is worth 1,000 words, and you can really see, looking at this draft, obviously it's boring and it's tedious, but it might be a good idea to look at that slideshow one more time.
The slideshow is good because it shows you the site plan, so you're looking at a diagram, a site plan. And then he takes you to an actual, you're on the road with him in that development, and you're on the street now, and the houses are there. So all of a sudden you can put it together in your head and say, there's the overlay of how they laid it out, this versus this, they moved things around over here and there, and it's a finessing. And at the end, he'll show you, if we've gone conventional, cluster versus conservation, these are the 3 different things. And at the end of the day, I think most people go, that would make the most sense. Financially, visually, livable, environmentally, recreationally, using the open space, and in the end, the people were happy.
You can go around the room and maybe get people's comments or something.
Well, first I want to, do we all agree that it would be worthwhile to try and schedule the DEM presentation?
I've seen some conservation development.
Larry,
I'd certainly like to see it. I'm a little concerned that it's not, that it's biased. Let me just be blunt about it. That it's presenting there's always 2 sides to a story, and the facts you present can tell a story the way you want it to be told. But if he's going to be, present the pros and cons of it, then fine. I'd like to hear it. If it's going to be a sales pitch for this, then I'm not interested.
It gives you the numbers and you see how it works out financially and what could have done with it.
I can see the benefits of this. I certainly think it's a much better way to go than cluster development. I'm just hung up on the mandatory part, but I'll be honest with you. That's my opinion.
So I think we gotta move away from that. Can't
I hear that.
This guy's the Rhode Island DEM, right?
works
This
at DEM,
isn't
he's a planner
this
with
isn't a
DEM.
developer or planner.
No,
That's
it's been
all
with statewide planning for
extra.
years. It's been around for a long
He's
time.
with statewide planning.
Okay.
And DEM's been looking at this whole thing for how long?
Back in the 3.
Well, 2003, so we're actually kind of, coming to the game a little later than many areas. It's not like it's
It's never
a brand new, no, I'm just saying, it's not like it's a brand new idea that hasn't been tried out, or doesn't even have,
Well, that's the track record, because as Tony said, I think one of their 9 communities that adapted conservation, how many? 10 that adapted conservation zoning in advance. If you go back and say, well, when did they adapt it? So they've got some history there now.
Yeah.
And he can say to you, well, they did this in 2000. And, by the time I saw the presentation, they had 6 years under their belt of living in that environment, or 8 years under their belt. And to see, how was the runoff affected by doing this versus this? What's the livability? And either it's going to be, we made mistakes and we shouldn't have done it, or it worked to the benefit of the people that purchased the homes in a conservation development.
Well,
You have a history.